Hey, it's Lisa Rothman, the founder of StopFamilyConflict.com. Today's video is about what happens when we miss the larger context of why a conflict is happening. It results in a whole lot of wasted time and energy and effort and can be very discouraging. And so today I want to share two stories from my own life in which this happened and what I would have liked to have done instead, and also from someone else who I worked with. And I want to acknowledge that this episode came about because I was inspired by my friend and colleague Jen Lamanlan, who has a wonderful podcast called Your Parenting Mojo, and I'll link to that in the description of this video, because that was a video that talked a lot about how important context is. Okay, so I read Jen's email about the podcast that she was releasing, and it was on exactly that same day that I found myself at my kitchen sink scrubbing some baking pans and being so frustrated because no matter what I did, I would put them in the oven. I would, bake something on them. I'd have the parchment paper down, and no matter how innocuous whatever it was that I was roasting, say a sweet potato, like the pans were just coming out just ookier and ookier and ookier. And first I tried the Scrub Daddy, and then I escalated to baking soda and hydrogen peroxide. I enlisted my husband Kevin's help. What a guy. And yeah, he was the one who he did the research about the baking soda and hydrogen peroxide. And nothing was coming off. And I was so frustrated to put the pans in the oven and then pull them out and have them be like much, much dirtier than when they went in, and with no apparent reason. It wasn't like I was baking anything saucy or leaky in there. Okay, or like I didn't have the parchment paper down. So I was expressing to Kevin how frustrated I was, and how much energy I was. He tried to scrub the stuff away, scrub, and it's like, what is going on here? And then I realized we haven't actually cleaned the inside of our oven since we got the oven a decade ago. And so I posited this hypothesis to Kevin. Hey, Kevin, do you think the reason that these pans are getting so dirty, even for no apparent reason, is actually because the inside of the oven is filthy, and things are like, when the oven gets hot, stuff's like floating through the air and then sticking to the pan? Would it make sense for us to actually clean the oven? And he said, that sounds like a good idea. And I guess you can guess where this is going. We did clean the oven. He really did. Thank you once again. What a guy. He cleaned the oven. And the next time I roasted sweet potatoes, my pans went in and came out, and they were the same. They didn't get dirtier in the oven, and this was such a relief. And I thought, gosh, I so wish I'd realized what the root cause of this issue was, that the larger context was, it's really hard to keep your baking pans clean no matter what you scrub them with if you're shoving them into an oven that is so dirty that stuff is going to be flopping onto it. All my effort was so misguided. I thought, oh gosh. And so it happened. I saw this episode about context. I started to apply it to my own life. And then I was thinking about how this happened with a family that I was working with. And the challenge they had was involving their very small child. She was, I think, just hovering around 2.5. And they couldn't understand why all of a sudden she'd been so happily collaborating with them around bedtime and putting clothes on and going out for the day and coming back home. She'd been so happy with all of that, and now all of a sudden they had this small person in their life who absolutely was refusing to do anything, even things that she typically enjoyed. And they were really frustrated and deeply, deeply confused. And after working with them and doing some role playing and problem solving, and it was going well, we were working on collaboration skills, all of a sudden the mom paused and she said, huh, I wonder if we're missing the big picture here. Just a few days ago, I decided I was done breastfeeding, and so I really have severely limited her access to my breasts. And that coincided with her daughter all of a sudden not wanting to do things. And we can imagine how confusing it was for her daughter. Her mother had made a unilateral decision about this, and this was completely different than anything this daughter had experienced in her time alive on this planet. And she was mad. And what is she going to do? She's going to start making some decisions of her own and saying no. Because, I mean, if mommy's saying no to something without, consulting with her, why wouldn't she say no to mommy and daddy, without checking in with them? You might be surprised, hey, that a 2.5-year-old's capable of this, but absolutely, 2.5-year-olds can absolutely care about other people's well-being. It helps if they have a sense that their well-being is being cared for, and that was not the case. And let me be clear, my gosh, 2.5 years of breastfeeding, I would be completely done with that and want out. That's just me. I mean, everyone's different. I know that's a sensitive topic, but I could totally empathize with why mom was done and wanted it to end. But it has to, the way to put all the needs on the table, which is what they then did, and came up with another, strategy that worked better. That worked better, was working better for everybody. So mom wasn't getting resentful. It had to do with, they did some problem solving around the timing. Mom assessed when it actually worked for her to do breastfeeding and when it didn't, and made a proposal to her daughter. Her daughter, was fine with it. And, they came up with other strategies for the daughter to soothe. They had a special drink that they made for her that the daughter really enjoyed. That she could, have at other times. They came up with it, they totally rocked it. But it's like, oh yeah, that's what happened. The bigger context was missing. And the situation, this piece about context not only came up for me as I was, futilely trying to get these baking trays clean and thinking about this family, but I was thinking back to my own childhood and the big picture context that was happening in my own childhood, which was, as many of you know, my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer when she was 5. And even though my parents knew that the cancer was spreading through her body, they didn't share this with me or pretty much anyone else until 3 months before she died when I was 16 years old. I don't think it is a coincidence that around the time that my mother had her breast removed, I started to exhibit all sorts of behaviors that they hadn't seen before and that they found very, very disturbing. I had a series of tics, grunts. I started to pick my cuticles and bite my nails. And rather than looking big picture, why would Lisa all of a sudden be like this? They unfortunately sort of just tried to get me to stop the behavior as opposed to being curious about what was going on. I mean, I think they were scared to face the truth of the situation for themselves. And so, better to just address Lisa's symptoms and also see them as Lisa's problem that Lisa needs to get on top of, all the while missing the sort of deeper issue that was what was feeding what my problem is. So this is why I care so much about this issue of bringing awareness to if your child or anybody starts doing something that you're not liking, that's leading to conflict, that seems different than what's come before, the first thing to do, rather than just head straight for the problematic symptom that's causing the conflict, is to ask, did anything change that would be prompting this change in this person? And if so, why don't we go there? Let's go sort of more upstream to deal with what's going on. Or if just in general, there's a stuck conflict. It's been going on for a really long time, and you've tried a number of things to try to shift it, and it's just not budging. To also say, okay, bigger picture here is perhaps, okay, say my child doesn't want to do their schoolwork, isn't enjoying their schoolwork. Okay, big picture, what's happening at school in general when it comes to the teachers, when it comes to the peers? Is something else happening here? Typically, what's discovered is there is, and it's in the larger context. So the invitation to all of you is to, when the conflicts arise and they seem new or they've been ongoing and stuck, what is the bigger picture? And address that instead. And I'm sure my parents could have used help. I'm sure they would have needed help if they were actually going to address that deeper issue. And I'm so glad that the family that I was working with sought out my support and discovered the root cause of why their 2.5-year-old was suddenly not wanting to do things that she had been completely willing to do before. And the invitation to all of you is, hey, if what you discover when you see the larger context feels overwhelming and like, wow, if we're really going to address that context, we're going to need some support, I invite you to consider, no pressure, but consider coming to a Conflict Repair Café, which happens on a regular basis, and the link is in the chat. All right. May all of the root causes of everything causing you conflict, may there be a clear understanding of what the context is, and may you have a clear path for addressing it. Until next time, bye for now.